Everyone knows Tyrus as the 6'8" powerhouse who doesn't pull any punches on national TV. But what he hasn't told the cameras is the story of the 15-year-old boy who was forced to sleep in school locker rooms just to survive the night. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on the secret life Tyrus kept hidden for decades, and the one private promise that finally explains why he walked away from it all. We see him today as George Murdoch, the towering figure on Fox News, the former WWE superstar once known as Brodus Clay, and the former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. We see a man who projects ultimate confidence, absolute authority, and a total refusal to back down from anyone. But that persona is a carefully constructed suit of armor. Behind the mohawk, the heavy gold chains, and the unfiltered political commentary is a past so dark, so violently unstable, that it feels almost miraculous that the man we see today survived it at all. This is not just a standard rags-to-riches tale. This is a story of profound psychological and physical trauma, of a child rejected by his own blood because of the color of his skin, and of the deep, quiet life he has built away from the spotlight with his wife, Ingrid Rinck. To truly understand Tyrus, we have to look past the spectacle of professional wrestling and the noise of cable news. We have to understand George Murdoch, the boy who had to build a monster just to protect the child inside. The story of George Murdoch begins in Boston, Massachusetts, in 1973. He was born to incredibly young parents. His father was 19, and his mother was only 15. Right from the very start, George's world was defined by volatility. His parents' relationship was marked by extreme domestic violence. In his memoir, George recalls terrifying instances where his father beat his mother, and on one horrific occasion, even attempted to throw a young George out of the window of their cramped apartment. Seeking an escape from the danger, George's mother fled with her children to her parents' home in California. But instead of finding a safe haven, George was met with a devastating realization. His mother's family was white, and his father was black. Because of their biracial heritage, George and his brother were rejected by their own grandparents. They were quite literally not allowed in the house. This cruel rejection forced George and his brother into the foster care system, separating them from their mother. For a young child, the psychological impact of this was immense. George became obsessed with the idea of changing his skin color. He would spend hours scrubbing his skin in the bath, genuinely believing that if he could just turn white, his grandparents would love him, and his family could be whole again. Eventually, George and his brother were reunited with their mother, but the stability did not last. She married a stepfather who brought a fresh wave of brutality into their lives. The abuse culminated when George was 13 years old, and his stepfather violently bashed out his front teeth. It was a massive turning point. George was growing rapidly, already possessing an imposing physical frame. One day, after another outburst of violence, George fought back, delivering a vengeance beating to his stepfather. Knowing he could no longer stay, George packed his entire life into a trash bag and walked out the door at just 15 years old, embarking on a dark period of homelessness, couch surfing, and sleeping in school locker rooms just to find shelter. But just when George thought he had escaped the cycle of violence, he made a decision that almost ended his life before it ever truly began. Most people think his journey from the streets to the ring was a straight line of hard work, but there is a forgotten chapter in Tyrus's life that he kept buried for years, a moment where he stood face to face with a prison sentence that would have locked him away forever. What was this secret crisis, and how did a legendary hip-hop superstar completely alter the trajectory of his destiny? To understand that, we have to look at the night everything almost went up in flames. Before the lights of the WWE and Fox News, George Murdoch's primary ticket out of poverty was his sheer physical size and athletic ability. He poured his rage and pain into football, eventually earning a spot at Quartz Hill High School and then Antelope Valley College. His talent on the field was undeniable, and he caught the attention of scouts, leading him to the University of Nebraska at Kearney. George was chasing a dream of playing in the NFL, a dream that seemed entirely within his grasp. He was studying education, harboring a quiet backup plan of becoming a schoolteacher so he could mentor kids who grew up just like him. But just as his future was aligning, a freak medical emergency shattered everything. George suffered a ruptured appendix. During the emergency surgery to save his life, doctors accidentally severed nerve endings that ran down into his left leg. The damage was catastrophic. He lost the full function of his leg, and with it, his football career was instantly dead. He completed his degree, but the sudden loss of his athletic identity left him adrift. George turned to the only other thing his massive 6'8" frame was good for: security. He began working as a bouncer in Los Angeles clubs, navigating a dangerous nightlife world. It was during one of these shifts that his life intersected with hip-hop royalty. George's imposing presence and sharp, no-nonsense attitude caught the attention of Snoop Dogg. He was hired as Snoop's personal bodyguard, a high-stress job that thrust him into the chaotic, glamorous, and often dangerous world of the music industry. George spent years shielding the superstar from hostile crowds and unpredictable situations, learning the art of crowd psychology and self-presentation. But George knew that being a bodyguard meant living in someone else's shadow. He wanted his own spotlight. In 2006, at 33 years old, an age when most athletes are considering retirement, George made the bold leap into professional wrestling. He signed with the WWE, eventually debuting as Brodus Clay. Initially cast as a generic monster heel, WWE Creative made a sudden, jarring pivot that tested George's versatility. They rebranded him as the Funkasaurus, a smiling, dancing, funk-loving character flanked by backup dancers. It was the ultimate contrast bias, a terrifying, scarred giant forced to dance in bright red tracksuits. Instead of resisting, George embraced the absurdity, showing an incredible emotional intelligence and showmanship that endeared him to millions of children worldwide. After parting ways with the WWE in 2014, George Murdoch didn't fade into obscurity. He rebranded himself as Tyrus and wrestled for total non-stop action, eventually capturing the prestigious NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. But a completely chance encounter on social media changed his life forever. In 2015, Tyrus watched Greg Gutfeld on Fox News and decided to call him out on Twitter, offering some humorous, blunt criticism. Gutfeld, amused by the giant wrestler's quick wit, invited him onto his show. What was supposed to be a one-time appearance turned into a massive success. Tyrus's unique blend of rugged, street-smart individualism, combined with a surprisingly articulate and deeply empathetic perspective, resonated with viewers. He became a permanent fixture on Gutfeld, helping propel the show to the #1 spot in late-night television. Yet, while his public career was exploding, Tyrus was harboring a profound transformation in his private life, driven by a woman who matched his resilience step for step, Ingrid Rinck. Ingrid, a highly successful fitness entrepreneur, wellness coach, and the founder of Sensible Meals, became Tyrus's anchor. Their love story began quietly over a decade ago. Unlike the chaotic, abusive households of Tyrus's childhood, his relationship with Ingrid was built on mutual respect and shared struggles. Ingrid had faced her own immense hurdles, including managing severe weight issues and navigating single motherhood. When her son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, she didn't succumb to despair. Instead, she researched nutrition and founded Sensible Meals, a multi-million-dollar meal preparation empire designed to help families eat healthier. This relentless work ethic mirrored George's own drive to overcome victimhood. Together, they formed an unstoppable partnership, eventually marrying in January 2024. For a man who spent his childhood scrubbing his skin in a bathtub to be accepted, finding a partner who saw him, loved him, and built a peaceful empire alongside him was the ultimate healing. The profound duality of Tyrus's life serves as a powerful case study in human resilience and the fallacy of first impressions. In the public eye, Tyrus is often viewed through a highly polarized lens. Some see him as a brash, physically intimidating conservative commentator, while others remember him as a cartoonish wrestling character. But when you look at the actual data of his life, a different narrative emerges. Consider his relationship with his children. Tyrus and Ingrid share a daughter, Georgia, born in 2014, alongside a blended family of stepchildren. Tyrus has publicly spoken about the strict boundaries he maintains to protect his family from the toxicity of his fame. He refuses to raise his children in the chaotic media hubs of New York or Los Angeles. Instead, they live a quiet, grounded life on a farm in New Jersey and Montana. This deliberate choice is a direct response to his own upbringing. By removing his children from the spotlight, he is actively breaking the generational curse of instability that defined his own youth. Furthermore, his transition from a professional athlete to a New York Times best-selling author with his memoirs, Just Tyrus, Enough Said, highlights a rare intellectual agility. He didn't let his physical injuries define him, nor did he allow the labels of wrestler or bodyguard to limit his intellectual output. Ultimately, The Secret Life of Tyrus is not a story about political divides or wrestling championships. It is a story about the quiet promises we make to ourselves when we are at our lowest points. When George Murdoch was a 15-year-old boy sleeping in locker rooms with his life in a trash bag, he made a promise that he would never let anyone dictate his worth again. Every step of his journey, from protecting Snoop Dogg to dancing as the Funkasaurus, and from dominating cable news to building a quiet fitness and farming empire with Ingrid, has been about keeping that promise. He walked away from active wrestling in August 2023, retiring at the very top as the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, not because he couldn't fight anymore, but because he finally had a home worth fighting for. If you want to understand how a childhood of severe trauma can be forged into a life of absolute self-mastery, you need to look at the choices we make when the cameras are turned off. To see how other public figures have used similar private struggles to fuel their greatest achievements, click on the video on your screen right now, and we'll see you there.